Okay, you ready? Let me introduce myself. My name is Stephen Solomon. I served as an intelligence agent during the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was trained to analyze conflicts, to engage with local people, and to uncover the truth hidden behind the fog of war. It was a dangerous but a very rewarding job. But my current mission isn't about intelligence reports or battlefield strategies. It's all about the people. Over the past few years, the war in Ukraine has captivated the world, but it's often been reduced to headlines, statistics, or political talking points. What's often missing are the real stories, the ones that show the human cost of freedom, the resilience of a nation that's fighting for its very survival, and the hope that refuses to die, even in the darkest of times. It's easy to hear about Ukraine on TV or social media and to form a quick opinion. I think we've all been guilty of that. But as a former intel agent, I've been trained to go deeper than the headlines. I'm not trying to get caught up in propaganda or politics. I'm not pushing a narrative that supports the left or the right. This isn't Democrat or Republican, but I'm here to ask the questions that matter, to sit face to face with those living through this war and to hear their stories of struggle, their loss, and what peace could look like after so much suffering. The stories and experiences of the Ukrainian people are as diverse and hard to hear as you can imagine. This is about the lives behind the war, the courage and the pain and the determination to keep moving forward. This is the story of the Ukrainian people, told through their eyes. And it's a story we all need to hear. This is about answering the question, what does freedom cost? Hi. Anyone speak English? Sorry, I'm American. Nice to meet you. What do your signs say? I can't read Ukrainian, I'm sorry. So tell me what your signs say. Like, what does that sign say?
Volunteers is not a prisoners, not a slaves.
Volunteers aren't slaves. Why are you taking the time to do this then? Do you have family members that are serving right now?
Yeah, my husband.
Your husband?
Yes, he goes in the first days of this full-scale war. If being honest, it's too hard. You know, because they don't have rights. They don't have normal rest.
What kind of rights do you want the soldiers to have?
We want our governments to make these clear terms of service.
In Western Ukraine, the impact of this war feels different, yet its presence is undeniable. While some of the Western regions are spared from daily bombardments, families here still live in the shadows of conflict, watching as loved ones are sent to fight, uncertain of what tomorrow holds. In some towns in the West, there's a sense of business as usual, as most of the fighting is on the eastern border. It was obvious to me that not everyone agreed with the way the war was being managed, but I wanted to understand the perspective of someone in authority, making decisions impacting everyday people. So in the only major city not hit by bombs or missiles, Chernivtsi, I got an interview with Oleksiy Boyko. He's the chairman of the regional council, basically the Speaker of the House for this far western region. I was hoping his perspective would shed some light on the future of Ukraine and help me get some understanding on how this war is impacting people far from the front lines. I guess I just want to first talk politics. We're coming up on the election with Trump and Harris in the United States. How does the government in Ukraine feel about the potential Trump return?
I prefer to speak about my region. We believe we should not deal with political issues during the wartime. We should not differentiate even in our views. I think our country leadership has the same opinion because we should keep our unity. Our unity is around the suffering of our people and the war that is going on our territory. The most important thing that unites us is our victory, and we are sure that it will come. We are thinking about the long time of the war and more sacrifice. It's a bet not only for the rest of the world. This is a signal that in the 21st century, in a democratic country like Ukraine, in the middle of Europe, there should not be a war. And I think everybody should understand this.
If you could, try to put yourself in the position of an American, and you see the Ukrainian war on TV, that American is going to say, why is Russia attacking Ukraine? So what would your answer to that person be?
I think before the war in Ukraine, there were many Ukrainians who also watched television and got news about conflicts and wars in the other parts of the world. But Ukraine is a young country. We used to be a part of the Soviet Union, and I think that America is a country that has a very strong role in the world. And I think that the people who were watching us live in the Soviet Union understood that we would like to be a part of the free world. And of course, every citizen, first of all, thinks about his or her own country. And we understand this. But I would like to highlight once more that Russia does not want only to take Ukraine. Their plans are more bigger. And today, everybody in Ukraine, starting from our military people, including our president and our government, local governments, everybody understands that when we are fighting for Ukraine, we are fighting for something bigger.
I know you speak with the governor of your region. Do you ever have meetings with Zelensky?
He has meetings with our unity of local communities and local governments. So last meeting was yesterday. Our president presented a victory plan to us and we had a discussion. And then built on a victory plan of our president, we developed our own regional plans. And then we will vote in our local regional parliament. This document presents them to our international partners.
Let me ask you about your region particularly. You're not on the front line, so what's the biggest thing that you're doing to support your countrymen from this region?
Yes, definitely we are not in the front line territory, but I cannot say that we are not in the war, because we feel the war right here and we suffer from it. Every day we can hear the sirens. We got information that school, kindergartens, official buildings were mined. I think without exaggeration, every family in our region will suffer from the war and have somebody from their family either in the army or already killed.
Is this region the part of Ukraine that has taken in the most refugees?
I think region has the most people going through it. It's sad, but probably the largest number of IDPs are in the regions that are close to the front line.
Let's talk about faith for a moment. What role does your faith play in this whole thing?
I think this is where I got my strength and power. This is where I got encouragement from myself, from my family, from my relatives to go through all these difficulties. Because the truth is that we just look nice, but inside we came older, at least for 10 years. So this faith is much easier to go through with struggles.
Hearing about the impact and policies from a leader's perspective, I was left thinking of those who bear the cost firsthand. While leaders make decisions, it's the people of Ukraine who shoulder the weight. And across the country, families live with the reality that the war can reach them in a heartbeat, taking fathers, brothers, and sons. This is where the reach of war becomes painfully personal, where every goodbye could be their last. What I saw is that there exists a state of anxiety where, lurking around every corner and down many typical roads, there are roving police and military member checkpoints. These government officials are looking to take men to the front lines. You see, in Ukraine, you must serve in the military if you're between the ages of 25 and 60, unless you have 3 children and then you're exempt. Men are involuntarily scripted into the military, often taken on the spot from their homes while taking out the trash or driving down the road. I saw this happen multiple times to men at checkpoints while I was driving around Ukraine. My vehicle was stopped multiple times, but as an American, I was waved on to go about my business. But if you were a Ukrainian man, you might not be so lucky. In some places, there was an unwritten agreement between the police and local men regarding chaplains. For instance, if you were serving as a pastor or a spiritual leader, you could potentially be spared from service. Now, this isn't a hard and fast rule, and if you ran into an official who was having a bad day, you might just find yourself on your way to basic training. This stop and check environment has definitely led to a huge decrease in morale among the Ukrainian people, particularly among the women. When the war first broke out, it seemed that every able-bodied man raised his hand to volunteer. They want to be free. They love their country. They oppose Russia's invasion. But as the years have slogged on and the casualties have piled up, and the government has begun checkpoints to find those who are not on the front lines, I have seen that morale has plummeted. The Ukrainian people want to be free, but they are finding it more and more difficult to trust even their own government. One woman told me about her son, a man with a heart condition. She showed me his paperwork exempting him from military service. A few hours prior to our conversation, she and her son had been traveling down the road and were stopped at a military checkpoint. He was asked why he wasn't in the army, so he presented his heart condition exemption paperwork. But the guards said they didn't believe him and took him on the spot to a hospital to conduct brand new medical tests. When the woman and I spoke, her son was still in custody with the military, waiting for the results of his new tests. She was afraid they were going to take him to the front lines no matter the results of the examination. Drafts aren't anything new. We've had our own in the United States, but there is something different about this type of compulsory service. Ukraine's very existence is being challenged by a country much larger and more powerful than they are, and it's all hands on deck in the most urgent way possible. But still, when you're living in fear of your own government as well as an invading government, it creates a sense of hopelessness and desperation. The cost of freedom is indeed very high across Ukraine, whether on the front lines or not. The city square essentially came to a halt, and they honored the dead and the war in Ukraine. And the city begins to bustle again. Apparently this happens every morning at 9 a.m. I wanted to hear from those making a difference on the ground. And that's where I met Max, a car salesman by trade, but a man driven by something far deeper than his job. You see, once a month, Max drives 12 hours across the country through checkpoints and war-torn landscapes to help rebuild homes destroyed by Russian attacks. Max brings a small group of volunteers with him, staying for a week to repair roofs, patch walls, fix windows, and restore what little normalcy is possible. It's not his profession, but for Max, it's a calling. Do you have any family members that you've lost in the war?
Yeah,
Who?
and my brother-in-law in Nikolaev, he's a soldier, and Russian artillery bombed the base where the soldier sleeps, and one night they dead.
I'm sorry.
Ah, no, it's okay. It's war. I see many kids who dead in Kherson, near Kherson. It's more difficult
Yeah.
when kids cry or lost hand or leg, because you know, after the Russian, when Kherson occupied, village is near the Kherson, and forest or field, all a mine, you know, and all time in many kids who don't know and step on the mine and lost a leg. And I don't know, sometimes I don't have words when I talk with kids.
Have you lost anybody?
Yes, our friend is missed. Maybe almost a year.
Amid the grief and resilience of those remembering the fallen, I met Valeri. His story, like so many others, reveals a deeper strength. Since the first days of the war, Valeri has been delivering food to soldiers on the front lines in northern Ukraine, risking his own safety amidst Russian attacks in order to support those defending their homeland. Even here, in the simplest of acts, the spirit of this nation endures. Tell me about the front lines.
Ну, з перших днів ми почали виїжджати.
Where did you go?
Їздили на Донецьк. Самі перші їхали в Чернігів, перший наш виїзд.
What was your experience like?
Я їхав один із перших з нашої області, я їхав. Ще не знали, як фронт іде, як він стоїть фронт. Я поїхав, і з вулиці вийшов чоловік і нас зупинив. Каже, видите, от посадка рядом. За посадкою стоїть 12 кілометрів русський.
You showed me some pictures of men who had lost their legs and were injured at a hospital. What were their stories?
Ми були, довозили військовим їжу практично з початку війни. І ми їздили рік з половиною до хлопців. І одного разу сильний був обстріл, завезли ми їм їжу. Такий був обстріл, що було чути, який снаряд зривається, а який просто падає в землю. І після тої зустрічі я вже через 2 місяці я його єлі знайшов у Києві в госпіталі без однієї ноги.
The ripple effects of war don't stop at Ukraine's borders. For millions, survival meant leaving behind everything they knew and fleeing to neighboring countries like Moldova. It was here in Moldova that I met a Ukrainian woman, a refugee with her husband, 4 children, and mother-in-law, who were all living together in one room. She told me about the months they spent in the basement of their apartment building as rockets exploded around them. Nowhere to go, no safe place to turn. It was a neighbor's kindness, a small gift of money, that allowed them to flee. In Moldova, with the help of a humanitarian organization, they found refuge in a temporary housing compound. For now, it's a step towards safety and stability. But the question of what comes next remains uncertain. When did you decide to come to Moldova?
On April 16th, we came here because we had rockets falling right into our yard.
Can you tell me your story?
We are an ordinary Ukrainian family. On the eve before the war, I lost my mom. My husband lost his father. It was a coincidence. A couple of days later, the war started. It was even more of a blow. When we made the decision to leave, that's when the rockets fell right into the yard. We live in an apartment on a high floor. We were afraid, living in a 5-story building. We moved to the basement and we lived there for 2 months. It was hard. There was no water. My husband couldn't work because he could be taken away. We didn't have a place to go. It was very scary. It was very scary with 4 kids. Our neighbor, by some miracle, offered just to help us, offered us money, and did save us. It was just a message from God. We just got in the car and drove away. The little one was 2 when we left. She didn't even realize what was going on. We came to Moldova. We were picked up from Polanka by volunteers and brought here.
On the front lines of this war, survival and faith intertwine in ways that few of us can imagine. That's where I met Eugene, a pastor born and raised in Kherson, a city caught in the crossfire. Before the war, his church was a thriving community. He had about 120 people in his church, but today, only 20 remain. The rest forced to flee as the city became a battleground. But even in the face of propaganda, suffering, and unimaginable loss, Eugene continues to pastor his church, offering hope and a sense of purpose to those who've stayed behind. Are you under rocket attack every night?
Every morning, afternoon, and night.
How many people are in your city?
Before the war, there was about 300,000 people. Now there is about 30,000.
Is the city just gone?
No, the place is about 30% destroyed. Now there is a lot of Russian drones that are just shooting at people.
No. What do you mean when you say the drones hunt the people?
It doesn't matter to them whether it's a woman or a man or a woman with the children. They see the national animosity and they are shooting at people who are just walking.
The Russians hate you.
I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Why?
Because that's what they are taught through the media. They are constantly being lied to through the TV that there are Nazis here, that children are eaten here at night, and all sorts of nonsense like that.
Were you given warnings before the attacks to get out?
By now, the people who are still in Kherson, they are no longer afraid. People were leaving when the shelling first began. Now, if they are walking somewhere on the street, they don't even stop. People are living this kind of life as there is no war.
Do you think things will ever go back to normal?
It will take a very long time and a lot of effort.
One story in particular really stood out to me. It was told to me by Serge Rakuba, the director of Mission Eurasia, which is a group that provides food, shelter, and social services to those most impacted by the conflict. Sergei shared a story from the early days of the war, a chaotic border scene where a woman who was clutching her 2 children desperately tried to flee Ukraine. The youngest was wrapped in a blanket and was crying for his father, who couldn't cross the border because Ukraine wouldn't let the men leave, but stayed to help his family reach safety. It's moments like these, heartbreaking yet profoundly human, that reveal the cost of war, not just in lives, but in the bonds it tears apart.
We went straight to the border, and there were several checkpoints at the border between Ukraine and Moldova, and all of those were flooded with, I don't know, tens and tens of thousands of people. We're driving toward the border, and we're in the traffic, and lots of buses go toward the border, to pick up refugees. So we come to the place, it was hard to find parking. We dropped our van and we walk. And if you've seen the chaos, I don't know, you can imagine what it is. A sea of people, everybody's fighting for either a spot in the bus, in any vehicle they can find, carrying children, elderly, wheelchairs, pushing wheelchairs around with elderly parents or so. And there is a border checkpoint a little farther, of course, so there is security, otherwise, people would just smash that all. And you see a huge crowd behind the gate there on the Ukrainian territory, and there is no end to the sea of just a huge crowd of people.
Women and children, mainly?
Women and children, mainly. There's a man, so helping children, you can see, so, but they cannot cross the border. And so then I've noticed mom walking with 2 little children, dragging them behind. The youngest one, he was not even 5, he was about 4 years old. She's dragging a suitcase. Kids have something on their shoulders, little backpacks, and a little one is carrying a blanket. It's kind of falling, and he picks this up. He clings to his chest, but he always turns around and he cries and he's asking his mom, "Where is my daddy?"
As I traveled through Ukraine, I had the chance to speak with Mission Eurasia's CFO, who shared a story that reveals not just the physical cost of this war, but the deliberate attempts to break the spirit of the people. We sat in a van at dusk as she described how their warehouse in Irpin was destroyed by Russian forces, a place that had once been a hub of hope, storing supplies and Bibles for those in need. She told me how the Russians ransacked the warehouse, throwing their Bibles into the streets and setting them on fire. It wasn't just an act of destruction, it was a statement. A cruel reminder that they sought not just to take control of the land, but to extinguish the values and beliefs that give people strength.
At the time, we had a warehouse full of scripture and Christian literature, and all, which of course we don't anymore. But
Tell me about what happened with that. You don't have the warehouse anymore.
Oh well, our headquarters, we had people stay there for about a week after the war broke out, and actually we took in refugees fleeing west from parts of the country, but then it became apparent even that was not going to be safe. So we had to evacuate, and I don't know, our headquarters are in Irpin, and I don't know if you heard kind of what happened in Irpin and Bucha, but
tell me.
The Russians came in and it was terrible. I mean, just the atrocities, what they did to the people there, and they took over our building because it was a bigger building. We had a warehouse for all of our scripture and Christian literature, and we had a dormitory and a cafeteria. So they took that over as a place to occupy, and they kept some artillery stuff there. But that wasn't enough for them. They felt like they needed to make a statement, so they took all of our scripture and Christian literature out into the street in front of our building and burned it all. So eventually the Ukrainian army came in and liberated that area again. I think it was about a month or two later, and You know, we were able to get back in, and it's just it was just a shell of a building, and you know.
Is it usable now?
Oh no! It's just yeah, it will have to be completely destroyed and started over.
Dozed to the ground and rebuilt.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience when the Russians came into your town.
I was confused. I didn't expect this. At the same moment, I was angry. I didn't understand what I should do. When 2014, they almost came to us because we lived on the border with Crimea. I was asking God a question, how should I be? If the enemy comes and is wounded, I know that I should save him, but if he comes to take my wife, how should I behave? I received an answer from God that I should leave. When the full-fledged war came, I knew I had to be there because I knew the territory and had the resources. But in the beginning, it was a confusing situation.
What would you like people outside of Ukraine to know about the war?
We stay, we live, and we need your help, your protect, your pray about us. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your love. Thank you for these 3 years. You don't stop help for us. You don't stop support. And I believe God gives for us peace, and we start to live a simple life.
What would you like the world to know about what's happening here?
First of all, I want to thank the American people for praying for us, supporting us very much, and I want them to continue to support us no matter what circumstances, because it gives us support and hope that we will survive and remain whole as a nation.
What would you want the world to know about this war and what's happening here?
I think if I would share everything I would like to share with people in the world, you would not have enough storage to record what I have to say. I would love to say that the war is terrible, ugly thing. Because when we visit our military at the front line, we used to think that we are already saw all the terrible things. But every time I go there, I listen to this story that is more terrible than the one before. So, for example, in Kharkiv region, in the city Izum was taken by Russians. There were 2 houses, and the people went to their cellars of the houses to protect themselves. That part in the city became a gray zone with lots of fighting. The Ukrainian military could not get to these houses to rescue people because of constant shelling. I could be mistaken, but in one house there were 46 people, and in the end all people died, starving to death. Some people killed themselves because they lost all hope that anyone could help them. So their entire families buried there.
$42,000.
Yeah.
42,000
Yes, in 2 years.
have
Yeah.
lived in these 6 houses.
Yes, yeah. Each bed was full.
42,000.
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
Yes, and at the beginning, at the first months of the war, we also had refugees in our houses as well,
Yes.
and in all our children's homes through Moldova were refugees.
One thing that you told me is that you help repair buildings
Yeah.
that have been destroyed by Russian bombs.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
We start help people in Kherson and Kherson area. It's a front line near the Dnipro River.
Right along the border.
Yeah. And when Ukrainian army the occupation this city, in the next day we found food, clothes, and other stuff, and we visited this city, and I see all this problem. People who stay in occupation in this city, and after the occupation, Russian soldiers and army starting bombing this city more and more because it's, I don't know, they hate maybe Ukrainian nation Ukrainian people. And I see this problem because every day we see how Russian artillery destroyed this city, and we see people who need help, and we start repair roofs, windows, and helps for old women, old men, people who haven't father or man in family. It's like women
Widows
with
and
kids.
single women.
Yeah. And we
How many
start
trips have you taken to that city?
every month? Maybe
Every month?
now. Yeah, every month we visited Kherson. Now it's maybe 25 trips.
25 trips?
Yeah.
And every time you
Yeah.
go, you're fixing roofs
Yeah,
and buildings that have been destroyed?
windows, yeah, in school or a flat or a house. And after we work with kids in Kherson or villages near the Kherson, we help with food.
Is this
play
your job?
Games. No,
What's your job? What do you do for a living?
I'm a rent car. Before the war, I'm a rent car for people who
You
want.
rent cars to
Yeah,
people.
I'm left my business and start to help because I'm Christian and I must show love, Jesus, not just here and on the front line too.
Did you have to learn how to build houses or build roofs? Or did you already know how?
I have some guys who know what must do and just help for him. And after maybe 2 months, maybe 3, I know all. We buy very simple
how to do
stuff.
it.
Yeah, and we order a wood because it's all time you need some stuff for this.
So you're doing roofs,
Yeah.
you're doing food.
Yeah.
What else are you taking
clothes,
over there every month? Clothes.
Yeah, close to shoes.
How many roofs have you repaired from bombs?
It's many thousands.
Thousands?
Yeah.
When you go over, how long do you stay?
We stay 1 week.
And how many roofs can you do in 1 week?
In one day we make maybe 3 roofs and maybe 50 windows because windows it's more simple.
And you stay 7 days.
Yeah, and we stay in the city 7 days.
So you get around 20, 25 windows a week, roofs a week,
Yeah. And
and
after,
then the windows, and then the food, and then the clothes.
Yeah.
And you're just doing this because,
We do that all day.
and you don't know these people.
No.
Near Crimea, where the echoes of war have been loudest, I met a man whose story of resilience struck a deeply personal chord. When the war began, his family sent him money to help. But instead of keeping it for his own escape, he used it to organize evacuation buses, helping others flee to safety. And that single act of selflessness grew into something much larger, a foundation delivering aid to the front lines and rebuilding homes destroyed by shelling. In just a few short years, this man has delivered over 500 tons of aid to those in desperate need, providing not just supplies, but again, hope. And yet as he spoke about the work he's done, what impacted me most wasn't just his efforts, it was his family. He told me he has 3 daughters, all the same ages as mine. In that moment, I saw myself in him, a father, a husband, trying to protect his family while navigating a world torn apart by war. The weight of his fight for survival hit me hard. He wasn't just rebuilding homes, he was rebuilding a future for his children, even as the shadow of conflict loomed over them. And yet, despite the unimaginable challenges this guy's facing, his determination to help others and protect his family remains unshaken. It's resilience that's humbling and inspiring, and one that has stayed with me a long time since our conversation. How has your wife and kids handled this war?
When the war started, our friends sent us money to get us out of the country. My wife and I decided to use the money to buy fuel and fill up all the evacuation vehicles. And every night we stood on the highway and refueled the buses that were used in evacuation. At that time, there was a problem with fuel. We had 75 buses on the road, not including cars that drove until they ran out of fuel. They towed each other, we refueled them at night. In the daytime, we would negotiate for a fuel and then stand by the highway and help with refueling. When our army beat back the enemy from Kiev, we made the decision that I should go behind the front line and help our country, our soldiers, our civilians. That's how I formed for this ministry. I received a calling from God.
How old are you?
39 years old.
Why aren't you fighting? Why aren't you in the army?
The military came to us. I have a charitable foundation. In 1 year, we bring about 500 tons of aid to the front line. In Zhytomyr, we have support for internationally displaced people, approximately 1,200 families. You are not going to be ready before this. You just have to figure out what to do. The last time I had to go, my 3-year-old daughter ran up to me, sat at my legs. I was sitting on the floor. She sat at my legs, hugged me, and said, "Daddy, I love you so much." She put her arms around my neck and hugged me so hard. "I love you so much." And I hugged her and thought, what if I don't come back this time? And it was scary. I've got 3 girls. I tried to imagine what happens if I don't come back next time I leave. I realized that I am trying to create a good environment for them where they will grow and bloom like flowers. I believe that if God takes me away, their life will still be good. They will live it to the fullest. But this environment is destroyed, and only after 3 years I was afraid. I lived in the shelling zone for weeks. Every night there was a shooting, terrible shooting, and when I realized that I had to move out, it was impossible to go any further. We had attacks. When the military took us off location, rockets came and crushed us, and only the military and I stayed alive. I was never as scared as I was the last time when I imagined that I just could not be with my girls. I'm father. I want to help. I want to support them where they need it. I realize that I am still compelled to do what God has called me to do. I still have to go.
What do you do for a living?
My foundation is made with a 20-30 year perspective. We are also in the recovery business. We go to a person's house if people do not leave the house and stay there for whatever circumstances. We get calls from heads of village councils, and we allocate a team and finances to go and rebuild because of shelling. We rebuild the house so that people can save their lives. I believe if this war ends, it's going to be beautiful because there are people of faith who support this world, and I got to be there. I will say, behind every husband, a strong husband is an equally strong wife. Every time I go, my wife says, "I hate waiting for you go." And every time she says, "I am afraid."
In the midst of the devastation, there are those working to heal not just bodies, but hearts and minds, especially the youngest victims of this war. That's where I met Oksana, a psychologist who has devoted herself to helping Ukrainian children to cope with the trauma that they've experienced. Her creation, a cute little teddy bear named Upanchik, is more than just a toy. It's a companion for refugee children as they navigate a world that's been turned completely upside down. Each little Upanchik bear comes with a storybook about him, a little bear whose forest was destroyed, forcing him to find a new home among the other forest animals. For children displaced by the war, Upanchik's story mirrors their own, offering a sense of understanding and connection when they need it most. Oksana told me about the profound impact the war has had on the mental health of Ukraine's children, how the sounds of rockets and the fear of loss have left deep scars, kids separated from their fathers, sometimes permanently. But she hopes that Upanchik, with his story of resilience, can bring peace and hope to these children, and in her words, to the entire country. Oksana, thanks for being with me today. So you have a very interesting thing that you've done. You have created a bear, and the bear's name is what?
Upanchik.
Upanchik the bear, with a very unique story. Tell me about this bear and why you made him.
This bear is a result of my own personal pain of seeing a lot of death, and pain of being separated with my grandkids. I am working as a psychologist, psychotherapist on the topic of war. I work with the military as well as regular people. Since the first day of this war, I was wondering, what is my place in this war? There was one bear that had a bag on his shoulder. As a psychotherapist, we have an activity called the bag trick. I got an idea to write a story about the bear. His name came up instantly. I'm from the western part of Ukraine, and this name is very symbolic.
You said his name was symbolic. What is it? What is the symbolism?
This word means the one who knows how to deal with his own emotions and who is able to take care of his life.
He's got a thing right in here, a little pocket. What is this about?
He's got a couple of secrets. It's for kids and adults that go through drama because it's not always appropriate to hug them. The hug of the bear is the safe of those people. Bear has his hands that can stick together so he can hug others. It's national hero with our national colors. He goes to kids from other countries. In his backpacks, he carries the colors of the different kids' countries. This is the backpack for his dreams, because it's very important to dream for mental health. And the secret that you point out, it's the secret pocket to fill his heart with positive emotions. One boy hid his secret for his father, who is on the front lines. Military groups asked for those books to read to their kids over the phone. They sent books to their kids. The fathers also took pictures of themselves and made it into the heart to remind the kids that they are the man they can rely upon. Even one father who passed away, daughter was left with this image of her father who is always there to help. And it seems by those quite simple images we have these deep connections.
I want to talk about the psychological impact of the war on the kids.
Often we see the kids become emotional parents of their own parents. The one missile came and hit the barrier in the area where we were, and kids came to the session and they confronted us. The kids tell us their story and say, "Don't give up, we've been there." But this is about the adults have to be adults and they have to create a safe environment. In the Donetsk region, it's 50 kilometers, 10 miles from the front line. One of the church leaders, Elena Homchenko, she's working with the group as well. They have Christian school and kindergarten, and kids there, they are using this material. They come to a good state of emotional stability. But they are making miracles there. As for their school, the whole wall that was grey and very pleasant, and 10 miles to front line, where a lot of weapons can reach, they colored all the wall pictures from the story.
What do the kids need more than anything?
A little girl wrote in an essay that warmth and care is what kids need in this war.
War has a way of breaking things apart. Homes, lives, entire nations. But here in Ukraine, it's also brought people together in extraordinary ways. Across the country, a quiet army of volunteers and everyday citizens has risen to meet the needs of their neighbors. They're not soldiers, but their work is just as vital. They care for orphans, they tend to the wounded. They welcome strangers into their homes with open arms. This united front is made up of people who refuse to let the weight of war define them. At the heart of this movement are organizations like Mission Eurasia, whose work has become a lifeline for thousands. They provide more than just meals and shelter. They offer dignity and stability in a part of the world that has been turned upside down. Mission Eurasia, for example, is something that represents the best of what this united front can accomplish. They're ordinary people stepping into extraordinary roles, and they're giving compassion in the midst of chaos. I was able to sit down again with Serge and discuss in detail what he and his organization are trying to do to make a difference in this war-torn country of Ukraine.
How's this compared to other attempts?
It's different, Steve, because usually I come, so we have a lot more in-depth training, smaller groups, so we're meeting. And usually I come when we develop our strategies, so in terms how do we move our ministry programs together, the entire field ministries and organization. We gathered all our coordinators from all different 15 countries of the former Soviet Union plus Israel, together that lead our program. It's a leadership training program for the next generation called School Without Walls. It was fascinating to see them all together. I don't get that. But what's most exciting, they are all charged, if I can say, with the same vision, so they catch that excitement, for continue expanding ministries in their countries, reaching young people, helping families, communities that suffer because of the war, but at the same time to learn how to continue, be more effective amid the war, and all the challenges they have, continue their ministries. And that's exciting. It's exciting to see so that our investment, I'm talking about investment, our energy, our creativity, our efforts, but of course resources of our supporters who continue faithfully supporting our ministry yield. See Mission Eurasia's focus to equip the national Christian leaders to be effective in their ministry, to bring the gospel into a contemporary context of their lives. Basically, to be effective in the current reality, to continue bringing the gospel that transforms everything. When the war started, we're not a humanitarian organization. We're not about just bringing food, which is a great ministry. But we thought, since we know the context of this culture, I grew up here. I was formed spiritually here in this place, in this part of the world. I really know the church, so our network is going so deep and so far. And I know that these pastors, during this time of war, they are in such need. Nobody's complaining. If you can see, they're so grateful, but they're all heroes. That's where these people are surviving. They're leaning on churches. In a time of war, church became the most trusted entity in this country, and the pastors have a huge responsibility. These pastors, when they care for communities, when they care for new believers, they care for families, widows, of war, orphans, and so they need support. Church in Ukraine, since the war started, grew 3 times. I think it's a threefold increase in baptisms, so in outreach. Churches on the eastern side of Ukraine, that's where the war is more intense, are overflowing with new people.
What comes next for Mission Eurasia?
So we continue working with these pastors. We continue equipping them, through our program called Leadership Development in Time of War. So we continue providing resources for them, humanitarian resources. All these pastors, the first what they need enough Bibles. They need strength, of course, but they need enough Bibles. They need resources like aid, so that they can share with their communities, so they will continue ministering. But we also equip younger leaders. School Without Walls, that's our leadership training program for younger people. Continue equipping them, continue training them.
What are these?
This is food package for one family of 4 or 5 people for a week. During last 2 years, Mission Eurasia distributed 230,000 of such packages.
Each box will feed 5 people for a week.
Yes.
No. 230,000?
Yes.
In 2 years.
Yes.
What are all these people doing here?
This is volunteers who help distribute it through all Ukraine. And those people involved in action with this give hope. This is Christmas gift. Mission Eurasia provided boxes.
What goes in it?
And churches fill it with all things for kids, like sweets and some school things, and giving it through all Ukraine.
When the war began, many Ukrainians fled to the neighboring country of Moldova, thinking that their time here would be brief, that they would soon return home to their families, their communities, their lives. But as the months turned into years, these refugees have had to confront the painful reality of building a new life in a new land, all while carrying the weight of loss and longing for the country that they have left behind. In a quiet room in Moldova, I sat down with a group of these women who were sharing their stories of survival, sacrifice, and resilience. They have created more than a refuge. They've built a new community. They've started a Bible study to encourage each other, to find strength in faith, and to share burdens and issues that they're struggling with. They pray for one another. They pray for their families that they left behind, for the men, their husbands, their brothers that are still fighting in Ukraine. Above us were pages from Stalin's writings. They were covering the ceiling, not as a decoration, but as a bold and defiant statement. These women despise communism and everything it represents. So to them, by hanging Stalin's words above their heads, it symbolized their triumph over the oppressive spirit of the Soviet Union, and by extension, the modern Russian aggression that has driven them from their homes. As they spoke, I was humbled to witness their unshakable spirit, hope that they carry, even in the face of such immense hardship.
В 2014 году, да, младшему ребенку на тот момент было 4 месяца. Выехали, потому что обстрелы в городе были, ужасные. Получается 5 километров от Донецка, то есть Донецк и сразу Красногоровка, вот Марьянка. Мы выехали, 1,5 года мы проживали в Одессе. Потом мы вернулись домой, людей было очень мало, садики были все разбиты. Одну школу восстановили, то есть газа нет, периодически света очень, то есть тоже очень было. И жили в квартире, то есть поставили спонсоры, да, Папа Римский, от Папы Римского были котлы газовые и буржуйки дали. И в 2020 году я уже все, то есть не выдержала, то есть сказала, я не могу. Он поступил в колледж одесский, да, и младший уже как бы вырос, то есть за это время в школу пошел, и началась, то есть полномасштабная война. Да, и мы сразу в феврале еще не выезжали, в марте, 15 марта мы выехали. И то есть мы здесь находимся, мы не выезжали в Украину, не ездили ни разу, да. Наш город разбит на данный момент полностью.
Why did you choose Moldova?
Потому что близко, да, потому что, скорее всего, и что язык очень много, значит, язык, то есть потому что здесь много русскоязычного. И, то есть я восхищена осталась Молдовой и остаюсь, то есть я очень недовольна. Очень добродушные люди, и здесь я встретила любимого человечка. Я ее очень люблю, она мне, очень дорога.
Tell me about your time here.
Я приехала сюда в марте с Харькова, да, со своей семьей всей, с мужем. Вот, думали ненадолго, сидели, ждали, но потом пришло понимание, что жизнь продолжается и надо идти вперед. Устроились на работу, детей в школу, дочка в институт поступила. Та жизнь, которая была у меня в Харькове, я ее стараюсь здесь.
So tell me about what's on the grounds here.
Yeah, here we call the multifunctional Christian center. Was built on 9 hectares of land.
9 acres?
Yes, and we plan to use for summer camps for foster children, first of all. Foster families, Ukrainian refugees, and missionaries.
And that's stuff that you're currently already doing. So you currently house refugees from Ukraine.
Yes.
And you are currently fostering children.
Yes. Here on this facility, we have 6 children's homes here.
So you have your own biological children, and then you started fostering children.
Yes, I started 7 years ago.
Yes.
So I've took 4 foster children, and we still have them with us until they marry. We keep them as our biological.
Okay, so now we're walking up on homes for Ukrainian refugees, right?
Yes.
And there are 6?
There are 6 houses, yes. A few months ago, we had all of these houses full of Ukrainian refugees. Since the Ukrainian war began in February 2 years ago, they came here and they continue to stay until now. Right now we have refugees in that house.
I know that's not the same as fostering children. You know, refugees are a different sort of challenge altogether.
Yeah.
What's the big challenge? How do you navigate that challenge?
It was something new for us. We didn't know how to work with refugees, and they came here, different people, from different country. Was a challenge to speak the same language. They didn't know our culture, we didn't understand them, and it took a while to live together.
Are they doing okay? I mean, I know that's a tough thing to say, but having fled their country, living now in Moldova, are they getting along okay? Are they surviving and
Yes.
kind of adjusting to their new situation?
Many of them came here very traumatized, especially moms with children, and we needed to invite psychologists to do individual therapy, group therapy for them to be able to support them, and after months they felt much better, and now we became as a family, as a big family together.
So this building right here, for instance, which number is this? Which building is this?
House number 2.
House number 2.
There are 8 rooms.
8 rooms per house?
Per house, yeah.
And
one family in one room.
1 family per room.
Yeah. It's
so
hard
8 families per building.
8 families, or not really 8 families. We have a room only for men.
Okay.
We have individual people that come here and they live together in one room.
Have you lost any family members?
Thank God, no.
How many members in your church?
The name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ. 120 church members came to the church before the all-out war, but now there are 20 church members left.
Where have all the people gone?
Those church members have left, some to Europe, some to safer places, some to America.
Do they still think of you as their pastor?
Yes, I was a pastor before the full-scale war, and now I am a pastor for those people who stay. We have 300 people coming to church today, 2 times a week for worship.
You have a family?
Yes, wife Tatiana.
No children?
No children.
But you and your wife are in the city?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why haven't you left? Everyone else left.
The first 6 months I was on site, but I had a time where I went away for a month and then came right back because I realized that there are people out there who need help, and very few people who are willing to be there for them, listen to them, love them, and care for them.
What's your day-to-day life look like?
On a normal day, I come to the church in the morning and we plan with the team that we have at the church. We meet every day with people who come to the church and tend to their needs. The first thing to do is repair the roofs because there's constant shelling at night, medical care, and hot food. And the most important thing is listen to the person who came to you as a minister.
How are you doing emotionally?
I feel a very heavy load that I was not prepared for. But all this time, when I look back, I see that the Lord prepared me and gave me everything I needed. And as of today, I realize that He is giving strength to move forward. But there is a very great wearinesses.
How do you think this war will end?
I hope that Ukraine wins and Russia gives us back all of our prisoners.
How does it end?
You know, I see it actually, this is my subjective, you know, I really hope that God will intervene and someday, you know, we hear from the news as we've heard that Russia attacked, Russia withdrew because of, I don't know, could be international community got involved more decisively so that he realizes, you know, he has no upper hand in this war.
People are asking, what's happening? What's going to happen? How does it end?
I think it's recognition of Ukraine as a free state. And for today, just regaining all the territories we had in 1991. And of course, reparation and Russia paying for all the damage to Ukraine and Ukrainian people, so that we can rebuild physically. because no one will bring back to life those people we lost.
Hoping for.
I don't know. We pray about the finish of this world, and we want just like help for my people, my nation.
You're doing a great work.
It's my work very small because we have many big destroyed, many people who lost kids, parents, or husbands, and I can't help. I just make talk or pray or help with food, but it's nothing.
What do you hope happens?
I have a positive outlook on life. I see every scary thing that happens in my life not as a problem, but as an adventure. I still try to see everything positively. We move on, we hang in there, we have a purpose.
I came to Ukraine with one question in mind. How does this war end? I asked people across this country, volunteers, soldiers, pastors, refugees, children, leaders of all kinds, and their answers varied. Some spoke with hope, envisioning a victorious Ukraine where freedom prevails. Others were less certain, unsure of how the conflict could ever truly end. What struck me most wasn't their predictions, but their resilience. For them, the war isn't just a battle for land or politics. It's a fight for survival, for identity, and for freedom. They're tired, they're exhausted, but they want to be free. It was at a small church on a dark Halloween night that I began to understand the deeper truth about this fight. This wasn't just a refuge for displaced families. It was a place of transformation. This church had turned their grounds into a camp for children, giving them a chance to be kids again, even if only for a little while. On Halloween night, a night that I've always associated with fear and darkness and death, they created something beautiful, a gathering filled with laughter, hope, and unity. As the evening came to a close, we gathered around a fire. There they sang me a song about Ukraine, a prayer for forgiveness, for salvation, for unity, for courage. Their voices rising into the night seemed to echo the heart of the nation that I had traveled. It wasn't a cry for victory. It was a plea for resilience, for the strength to endure no matter what comes next. So sitting there listening to them, I realized something that had eluded me throughout this journey. This war doesn't have a definite ending. No one can predict anything. Ukraine may win or it may lose. Its borders could change. The nation itself might cease to exist. There are no guarantees here. But what struck me is that freedom for these people isn't just about territory or sovereignty. It's a spirit, a refusal to be conquered no matter how overwhelming the odds. And that's when I realized the cost of freedom may truly be everything. For these people, it's their homes, their loved ones, their safety, even their lives. They know this, and still they press on. They fight not because they're certain of victory, but because freedom itself is worth the cost, whatever that may be. Whether they are on their own or backed by the support of other nations, whether they have lots of military might or none of all, freedom is their goal, and they're willing to pay the costs. As I sat by that fire, watching its embers drift into the dark, I thought of my own time at war. I thought of Afghanistan. I thought of Iraq. I thought of my friends who had fought, some who had died, and of the level of sacrifice that so many are willing to make for the ultimate prize, freedom. And for Ukraine, the answer is clear to them. I heard it from their own lips. Freedom costs everything, and they're willing to pay the cost. That's what freedom is, a choice to stand, to resist, to believe in something greater than yourself, even when the outcome is uncertain.
Ти дарував життя за людей віддав, книгу життя нас записав, нас
Thank you for taking the time to watch this documentary. It means more to me than I can express, and I hope the stories and perspectives that you've heard today have given you something meaningful to think about. Since my trip to Ukraine, a lot has changed over there. Donald Trump has won the election, and the future of the war there remains uncertain. I think it's important to acknowledge the complexities of this conflict, not just in Ukraine, not just in Russia, even within our own United States. Corruption exists everywhere. And while I have my own thoughts and feelings about what should happen in Ukraine, the purpose of this documentary was not to promote an agenda of right or left. It was to give the Ukrainian people a voice so that we could hear their stories and understand their struggles. To put things into perspective, I think it's helpful to know a bit of history between Ukraine and Russia. You see, back in 1994, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Ukraine agreed to give up its nuclear arsenal through the Budapest Memorandum. And in exchange for security assurances from countries like the United States, the UK, and Russia, they did that. But in 2014, Russia invaded Crimea, violating those assurances, and they launched a larger scale invasion just a few years ago. So this war has roots that run deep, much deeper than just the last 3 years. And its impact is felt every day by ordinary people that I met on my journey. I did my best to keep the documentary around an hour. There were many people I met that were not seen or heard in this film, but their stories are powerful and they want to be free. Producing this documentary was a labor of love, and I want to give a special thank you to Annabelle York, my videographer, who followed me across Ukraine with a camera and a smile. And also a special mention to Mission Eurasia, a nonprofit that's doing incredible humanitarian work across Ukraine and in Europe as a whole. I got connected with them and they're incredible. I don't have a big studio or a massive budget. This project was made possible because of the support of people who believe in the importance of telling stories and promoting freedom. And that's why I created the Freedom Tree. It's a symbol of hope and unity. It's a 15-foot tall tree with red, white, and blue leaves, each one representing someone's contribution to freedom. By purchasing a leaf, you're not just supporting this documentary, you're also helping veteran organizations like Mighty Oaks and Wounded Warriors, and you're funding future documentaries that highlight the cost of freedom. Freedom is fragile. It's not guaranteed. It's something we have to fight for, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come. As a soldier who served in hot spots across Afghanistan, I know firsthand what it takes to protect the freedoms we often take for granted. And that's why I'm committed to creating more freedom-focused projects like this one. Together, we can ensure that the ideals of liberty and unity are preserved and passed down. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to say thank you. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for caring about the stories of people who want to be free. It's because of people like you that these stories can be told. And I hope that we'll continue this journey together in future projects. God bless you, and thank you.
Basically, all week long we've been seeing these, right? Well, for like 2 weeks. Like, we just keep seeing crab or crayfish, you know, glazed potato chips. And every time I'm like, no, that's disgusting. But it's our last day in Ukraine, and we're about to be in Budapest. We're driving there now, so let's just do it. If it's terrible, I blame Annabelle.
I don't know, he's shoving them in.
It's actually really good.